Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the Ask the Experts. We have a number of people here to help answer all of your questions. Hopefully you had a chance to watch the last session that Louis and I presented on building AI-powered applications with Azure Cognitive Search. Now, it was a pretty quick session. We talked through a lot of things really quickly. We talked through the Azure Cognitive Search technology. We talked through a bunch of different scenarios. We talked about a number of the new advancements we've done in security and went through our COVID search application and dug in deep. So hopefully all of you that are joining today had a chance to see that. And we'll go through and give you a chance to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, perfect. So if you don't, perfect. So my name is Luis Cabrera. You saw me in the previous session. Let's talk about how you can engage with us. Essentially, you will use chat to ask the questions. I am the moderator for this session, so I will be able to ask questions of Liam, and also we have Mark, another member of our team, and I will share those questions with them. If we get a lot of questions, we may not be able to cover all the questions, so feel free to upvote your questions using the thumbs up icon. And then we will answer your questions. Let's go to the next slide, Liam. So, look, this session will be recorded. This is a reminder. Please help us by not spamming or posting inappropriate content, and adhere to the Microsoft Code of Conduct, which we will show for a second, but I am not going to read. Essentially, please be a decent human being and help us have a great session. With that said, let's meet the experts. So we have Liam Cavanaugh and Mark Heffernan, both program managers in the Azure Cognitive Search team, both with different areas of expertise. Liam a lot in the area of core search capabilities. He's one of the founders of the team. Mark is really the expert when it comes to data ingestion. He knows a lot about enrichment and connectors. And I will be mostly asking questions, so I will really be distributing most of the questions to them. All right, so I think we can get started. I have a few questions from the audience. Okay, the first one is, will this run outside of Azure? Essentially, someone is looking for an on-prem solution, and they want to know if it is part of Azure stack. Liam, do you want to get us started with that one?
Sure, I'll start, and then maybe Mark can talk a little bit more about some of the enrichments and some of the things that you need to think or potentially consider from that point. So to specifically answer your question, no, this currently runs in the Azure cloud. And realistically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it so that we can not only take care of all of the management aspects that come with search, which makes it convenient to run in the cloud, but there are a lot of additional assets that Azure has running in the cloud that would make it hard for us to leverage fully in a disconnected environment. So to date, no, we haven't done that. Now, certainly when you look at Azure Stack, there are more services that are becoming available in that type of thing, and that's something that we are very closely watching, but it is not currently there today. So Mark, I'm curious, do you want to chat a little bit more from the indexing side of that?
Yeah, so Liam mentioned a little bit about how the search service itself will be in Azure, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your data, wherever it lives, has to be inside Azure in order to bring it into the search service. We have two different ways of bringing in content to the search service. One is by adding it directly to a search index. In that case, you can actually push the content directly to a particular search index. And the second way is through indexers, and these indexers connect to a bunch of different Azure data sources. So if you're able to move your data to one of these Azure data sources, even temporarily, you'll be able to pull it into Azure Cognitive Search and use it there.
Yeah, so just one more comment. Sometimes the reason that people want to do this is due to security. So if the core issue is security, it's not that you have to run it on-prem, because there is a law that says that you have to run it on-prem. It's possible to kind of put the service inside a virtual network. I wonder if, Mark, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the security characteristics and the capabilities that we have added recently related to VNets?
Yeah, so there's two different concepts that you want to think about here. One is the concept of traffic coming into the search service, and the other concept is coming out of the search service. So we've added two different capabilities where when you're looking at traffic coming into the search service, you can actually make your search service private so that it's not directly accessible by the outside internet. It's actually just run on information, or basically it's not accessible by the internet. In this case, you can actually use private.
Sorry, just a comment. Liam, you're sharing your screen.
Oh, sorry about that.
We can see all your expertise notes, including my phone number. So.
Thank you, sorry about that.
No worries.
So yeah, I was talking about information coming into the search service. So in this case, when somebody is querying the search service, or in order to actually access the search service endpoint, we can make sure and put the search service within a VNet and use private endpoints to make sure and protect it from outside internet traffic. The other way is actually reaching out from the search service to a secure data source. And in this case, maybe you have an Azure Blob storage account that's behind a firewall or behind a VNet, and you want the Azure Search Service to be able to connect to this using indexers. You can do this now through this new capability of private endpoints that we now support. So that the private endpoint will actually exist in our VNet for the search service and allow us to use that to allow the search service to connect to your data source that is behind a VNet.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it. There is another question on a different topic where Gavin has a large repository of images and they want to search through other images that may be similar or may have similar content. And the question is whether Azure Search has the capability to do this kind of similarity, similar to what Bing Visual Search does for the web. Maybe Mark?
Yeah, so right now we don't out of box provide that. We provide a number of different ways where you can ingest images and extract the content and put that into the index. But this is a great piece of feedback that we are looking at different ways of how we can explore in this area. So stay tuned for different things coming.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Mark, mind if I add a couple of things on that too?
Yeah, go ahead, Liam.
You know, like there's different ways that people want to search images that I see. Like, for example, if you look at some of the cognitive services, especially the vision based services, there's a lot of things in there that can actually be helpful to help you build out search. So, for example, what you can do is you can say you can train the vision services so that it can extract out and learn, different people. Or maybe learn that this is a dog, this is a cat, this is another item. And so that is actually pretty useful, because if you run it through that enrichment that Mark was referring to earlier, then all of a sudden you can tag your images, you can tag your content with metadata, words and terms that the search engine is really good at being able to kind of refine down to, and even extract out key colors and other aspects. So that part actually becomes quite possible today. I think, as Mark rightfully said, there are a lot of things that through machine learning, using things such as vectors, embeddings, that allow you to actually use that information of an image to find similarity. And that is another area that I think is up and coming that we're heavily looking at as well.
Okay, thank you. So there are some things like that, just to reiterate, because there was a lot of content. There is some things that you can do today by doing extraction using things like the image analysis skill, but in the future, hopefully we'll be able to also support embeddings-based similarity, but not yet. Okay, perfect. So there is another question from David, where he says, where does Cortex fall in this field? I would like to analyze technical documents and provide natural language questions and responses based on the document contents. So let's try to find how can we distinguish ourselves from Cortex. We have, for those of you that may not know, Cortex is a capability of Microsoft Search. So the question is, should I use Microsoft Search? Should I use Azure Cognitive Search? And how can I make that decision? Liam, if you don't mind helping us with this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is not an uncommon question. A lot of people use SharePoint, and Cortex has done a lot of work in being able to do the enrichment of content. Now, if you look at Cortex, this is an amazing solution for people that are in the Microsoft environment, the Microsoft 360 environment, and they want to have an effective search interface over that. So Cortex bringing in, going through your content, enriching it, and making it searchable. What we often find for Azure Cognitive Search is that people are building, line of business applications, organizational, more applications that need some very advanced search capabilities. And maybe you might have even saw if you were in the session before, where we were able to do, the really deep faceting and filtering and refining and adding in things such as document summarization to really optimize your search experience for what your organization needs. So that's not to say that you can't extend some of the content you have into SharePoint into Cognitive Search, but it's really Cortex is very tightly integrated into the Microsoft ecosystem, Microsoft 365 ecosystem.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I like how you mentioned whether you're using Microsoft 365 already or whether you need something custom. Thank you, Liam.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is one more question where someone, actually Rob, wants to develop some curated ontologies. So essentially extraction of entities and what the entities belong to, right? Mm-hmm. What practices do you recommend for jumpstarting these efforts? How could these ontologies work together with Azure Cognitive Search? Maybe Mark, it would be great to talk about the custom entity lookup as an example of this.
Yeah, so we have a new skill that's called the custom entity lookup skill, and it's part of our built-in AI skills that we provide as part of the pipeline. And we have a number of different built-in skills that include identifying different custom entities, known entities, identifying different languages and various things like that. But with this custom entity skill, you can actually look up a list of known entities that you have. So for example, let's say you know all of these ontologies and you want to extract these particular terms from this document that you're ingesting. So as part of the pipeline, we can pull that document in, run a skill set that has this custom skill or this built-in skill to extract that content from it, and then you can use output field mappings to actually map that information to a particular field in your index so that you can do things like filter, facet, and even sort on these different pieces of information that are now in your index.
Yeah. All right. One last, sorry, go ahead, Liam.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to add a couple things, but if you want to go to the next question, we could, whatever you like.
Yeah, so one more question, which is how to deal with multilingual documents. Let's say I have a corpus of documents, and some of them may be in German, some of them may be in Chinese, some in English, some in Spanish. What is the best way to deal with these documents? Maybe Mark?
Okay.
Yeah, sure. So one of the great things about Azure Cognitive Search is it's very customizable. And as part of this customization, we provide the ability to use different analyzers for different fields in the index. So let's say, for example, I have a document that maybe even has, or maybe I have multiple documents where some are in some language, some are in other languages. As part of the ingestion pipeline, I can pull those documents in, use a skill set to identify which language these particular fields are, or these particular documents are written in, and then I can actually use output field mappings to project those into the different fields for a particular document in the index. And each of these fields can actually use different analyzers that are specific to each one of these languages, so that if a particular person is searching for a document in a specific language, we can use that specific analyzer to make sure that we find the right document in the index.
Very, very nice. Thank you for answering this question. Let's see. I have a question from Joseph that says, why is it so difficult to delete records from the search index after it is loaded from Azure storage? Let's see, Liam, I don't know what it's so difficult, but maybe we can talk about what the process is for deleting records from the search index.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if the question is more around the idea of synchronizing deletes from, say, table storage.
Maybe maybe that's what it sounds like, because Joseph says from Azure storage. So maybe it's about this change tracking part. Yes.
Yeah, so it's true. You know, one of the things that is important to note when you're using our Azure Search indexer to crawl data stores such as SQL, Cosmos database, or table storage, what we do is we use whatever change tracking is available in that store. So for example, we can say to Azure Tables, give us all of the data since a certain point in time. But if that document has been removed, then there's no tracking or storage of that for us to use to pick that up. And so what we do is we use techniques such as flags, so that you can actually add in a field to your Azure Table storage and maybe put in the letter D or something like that to give us the knowledge that, oh, this is a document that needs to be propagated as a delete. And so we can bring that in and actually execute that delete. And then, you know, maybe when you know that the indexer has had time to run, then you can go and remove it. So it is definitely a concern that you want to keep in track of when you're using a data store that doesn't necessarily give us the delete change tracking.
Okay, very good.
One thing, if you don't mind to add there, but with Azure Blob storage, we actually now have a preview support for the native soft deletes. So Liam talked about how we can do different things with flagging particular documents that are kind of quote unquote soft deleted, and then you check the index, make sure that deleted, and then you can delete it after that. But now we have a preview for integrating with the native Blob soft delete, so that if you use that, you can just normally delete it with the native Blob soft delete, and we will actually pick up those changes automatically.
Yeah, this is great, and I hope that makes Joseph's life much easier, so that he doesn't have to worry about creating a deletion field. Okay, there is another question. Can we leverage cognitive search against nodes entered into custom entity records in Dynamics 365 for sales? We have a custom node entity with several relationships defined. So essentially someone trying to extract data from Dynamics in this case. What would be the best way to deal with a situation like this, Mark?
Sure. So we currently don't have a connector for our indexers to pull data from Dynamics 365 right now. But I will say we do have a number of different data sources that we're supporting right now in preview, and we're continuing to work very aggressively at making sure that we can go ahead and make sure and support new data sources, and actually many different data sources in the future. So one option that you could do right now is actually move this content over to one of the supported data sources for our indexers and pull it in through one of those methods. Or if you want, you can actually push data directly to the index using either a REST API or one of our many SDKs now, directly into the index from Dynamics 365.
Very good. There is another question on whether can cognitive services, I guess it's cognitive search, essentially identify private health information and tag the account or the records with private health information. And I think we can talk a little bit about private identifiable information in general for this one as well. Mark?
Sure. So one of the things as part of our, I believe our entity recognition skill is the actual ability to identify different PII within the documents. So one of the things we can do is identify that we can pull the content in, we can extract the different text out of this, and then as part of your skill set, you can identify the PII that you may want to remove and not actually include in the index. If you have requirements that maybe go beyond that, as part of your skill set, you can actually create custom skills to make sure and basically potentially do additional checks to make sure that everything is removed, maybe if you know particular entities that you need to look for, or if you have your own models that you want to use to remove this information before it enters the index.
That's great. Thank you so much. One recommendation that I will have there is to look at the PII or the entity lookup skill and look at the actual list of entities that we support, just to make sure that those match the ones that you need. They are essentially sorted there by country. For instance, we may have like, I don't know, Canadian bank numbers or SWIFT numbers or you know, like social security numbers for the United States and things like that. So depending on the country, we support different types of private information that you may want to check. And if not, as Mark mentioned, you can always create a custom skill. All right, a few more questions. Let me see, we have like 10 minutes. One question I hear often is how to deal with people mistyping queries. Like, for instance, maybe they are creating a catalog. Let's say they type something like Fortnite, but and they want the game, but they may type it Fortnight, and they still want to be able to find those results. So Liam, how will we go about helping this individual create the right configuration in the service so they will find the results?
Yeah, there's a number of things built into the search service to allow you to enable those types of things, and it can kind of differ based on what you're trying to achieve. For example, you might have saw in the last session where I showed, when I was showing the VS Code integration, the ability to use what's called language analyzers. So for example, we have language analyzers to support well over 50 different languages. And if you use things such as our Microsoft language analyzers, like our Microsoft English or Microsoft French, it deeply understands that. So it understands different variations of words. I gave the examples of run, runner, running. We saw an example where I searched for mouse, but it found mice and vice versa. So those types of things can help you achieve various different variations. But in some cases, you need to go even more than that. So for example, handling spelling mistakes. We have this capability called fuzzy search, so that when you search, we can handle small variations in the spelling. So small spelling mistakes that might happen. Or you might even find, maybe you're doing audio transcription. And so in that audio, you've extracted the transcripts, but maybe the transcription didn't come out perfectly. Like maybe they said sequel, but it actually wrote it down as sequel. So what's actually really interesting about that is what's called a phonetically similar word. And so through our analyzers, what you can even do is you can say, I want to be able to support phonetic matching, so that even if the person types in SQL, but in the content it's referred to as sequel, which sounds phonetically similar, we can still do matches so that you can actually go more advanced. So if you look at our language analyzers that are just out of the box, they're quite good, but you can even do much more advanced things such as this phonetics using what we call custom analyzers.
Very well. Thank you, Liam. There is one more question. Some customers mentioned that they find it hard to compose skill sets. There was a question on that at the actual session, and they want to know what's going on inside of them. What is the best way to create these skill sets? Mark, is that something that you can help us with?
Yeah, definitely. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd actually love to show my screen and give a quick demo of this.
That would be great. Yes. Nothing better than a demo to learn. So there you go. We see your screen just now. Thank you, Mark.
So yeah, one of the things that a lot of customers seem to ask about is how do I really identify what content my skill set is extracting, or maybe I'm just having problems with taking the content that I've extracted and putting it into the index. Maybe I know the content is there somewhere, I just don't have quite the understanding of where this is ending up, so I don't know how to put it in a particular field in the index. One of the things that we just added, and it's in preview, are called debug sessions. So I can go ahead and actually create an example debug session for you right now. With this debug session, I'm going to go ahead and first add a storage connection string. And what this will do is this will just put a place for the output artifacts that I have with this debug session, basically for them to live. So, and yes, you can see part of my key, but you won't be able to see all of it. So don't worry, you won't be able to guess the rest of it. The next step here that I'm going to do is I'm going to choose an indexer template, and I actually already have one defined. What this is basically doing is choosing the skill set that we're going to use as part of this debug session, as well as the data source that we're going to pull from. The next step that we can do here is we can just select the first document that's a part of the data source, or we can actually specify a specific document. So maybe I'm in a scenario where I have a specific document that's giving me a lot of trouble. I don't understand what's going wrong with it. I can actually point directly to the document and we can debug the problem from there. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save this session. And then by saving this session, the first thing you'll see here is the skill graph. And with the skill graph, basically what it's doing for me is it's showing me a visualization of this skill set. So in my skill set, the first thing that's happening here is a field mapping, and I can actually click on each one of these different steps. With the field mapping, I'm actually doing a base64 encoding of the metadata storage path, and the reason that I'm doing that is because I'm using this as the key for the search index, or for each document in the search index. The next thing as part of my skill set is I'm actually doing some OCR. And with this OCR, I'm actually extracting all of the text that might be any images that I'm able to extract from the document that I'm ingesting. Next, I'll actually merge. So I will merge the text that I've extracted from a particular document or from the particular images of the document and merge that with the text that I extracted from the document. Next, you can see I have a couple different skills that I'm using. I'm using entity recognition and the key phrase extraction skill. And then finally, I'll use output field mappings to take this whole enriched content and project and put it right into the fields in the document or put it in the particular fields for a document in the index. So I'm going to go ahead and next run this. And as it's running, you can actually see in real time which one of these skills are currently processing. And hopefully this won't take too long because we're just going to go ahead and index one document. What it's doing here is it's running these various skills, outputting that information to my storage account so that I can then look at the enriched data structure and see, okay, there was one image in my document that it was able to extract. And then I can see the content that it was able to extract from this. And I can actually dig down to each one of these different phases where I can see the enrichment tree that's growing and start to understand, oh, okay, I was able to identify that Washington was linked in, or was mentioned in my document. I was able to identify these different entities that were mentioned in my document. And with this process, I can better understand the tree of information that really came out of this skill set, and I can get a better understanding of how I can use this information to go ahead and put that into the search index.
Very well, thank you. Yeah, I have found debug sessions very useful myself, and yeah, so it's a great resource if you are learning to use Azure Cognitive Search, if you want to know what's going on inside a skill set. All right, let's see, I have a few more questions. Gavin is asking whether we can, well, this is probably your last question, can we create an Azure Search cluster in multiple regions for load balancing and high availability? Essentially, what is the pattern in order to create something like that? Mark?
Sure. So right now, we don't have any geo-replication, but it is definitely feedback that we're looking at and something that we're thinking about right now. The recommendation right now for how you would handle a situation like this is to go ahead and use multiple instances of an Azure Search or of Azure Search services in different regions, and then use load balancer on top of that to make sure that you're able to continue to provide a service to your customers, no matter if one region goes down or one region is unavailable. So the recommendation here is to go and provide or go and create multiple different search services in these different regions to get the availability that you need.
Perfect. With that said, I think we're running out of time, so we want to leave you with these resources, and we thank you so much for joining the session and for joining the Ask the Experts session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.